Hey, I'm Sean. I've gotten a couple questions lately, especially from younger filmmakers and creators about what microphones to get, depending on what they want to do. The advice sort of changes, so I thought I'd take a second to make a video to answer the question. If you're about to buy your first microphone, what microphone, or at least what kind of microphone, should you buy? So I wanted to walk through what are the 5 levels of sound quality that you can have in your videos. And you may find that that level 1 is fine for what you're doing, or you want to go to level 2 or 3, or all the way to level 5. It really depends on what you're doing. And this is a good time to say that if you're watching this on your phone or a tablet or a computer, it's important to remember that the sound that's being recorded is going to sound different coming out of your phone or your headphones, depending on what kind of headphones they are, what kind of phone you have. If you're watching this on a TV with good speakers connected to it, there's a lot that can affect how the sound sounds. And so keep that in mind as we talk about these different microphones and compare them, because the other part here is that if you're watching this on your phone, it probably doesn't sound as good as it would sound plugged into a big sound system. But if you know that you're creating content that is going to be consumed largely on tablets or mobile devices, or if you're producing content that's going to be shown in theaters, that's going to go a long way to determine what you should do to prepare your project to be equipped to have the sound quality that you need for the end user. And so if you know that you're going to end up on a lot of cell phones, keep that in mind, and maybe going with the most crazy, over-the-top, high-quality sound would just be overkill and it'd be a redundant waste of time, because all that quality would be lost by the time it gets to your final viewer anyway. So keep that in mind and think about that as we get started. But here we go. So level 1 is the cheapest entry point into getting better audio than the built-in audio in your camera, and that is lapel mics or lavalier mics. And I'm wearing the Rode Link lavalier microphone, the microphone that comes with the Rode Link Filmmakers Kit. It's a very handy little microphone. The lapels pick up, they're omnidirectional, so they pick up anything that's happening, which is good because if you're moving around, if you move around from a shotgun microphone, if this is the audio from the shotgun microphone, as I step back over here, it starts sounding awful and distant, and it doesn't really work that well. But no matter where I go with the lapel microphone, it always sounds good because the microphone stays consistent on my chest. The 2 big advantages to lapel microphones are, 1, they clip to you, and so no matter where you move, they follow you. You don't have to have a boom operator moving the sound pole. It's always going to stay relatively equal as you move around. And even if you turn your head a little extreme, you'll lose the sound a little bit. But for the most part, it's not horrible, and it's definitely not as bad as it would be with a shotgun microphone. The other advantage to lapel microphones is oftentimes they're a lot cheaper than the alternatives. And so when you are looking at getting into microphones, a lapel mic can be an easy, cheap way to take your production levels and your sound quality up quite a big step over the in-camera microphones without breaking the bank. I have 2 lapel microphones to compare. I have this wireless Rode Link lapel mic, and then I also have an Aperture A-Lav that they sent me after I did the review. This is not a paid thing, but they did send me the mic for free, which was super nice of them. So I'm going to take a quick second and switch to the other microphone. But a quick note moving forward with all of these, and I'm going to have to switch it, is your sound levels. Make sure you get your sound levels right, because it doesn't matter how good your microphone is. If it is recorded at too soft of a level or too loud of a level, you're going to be in a bad place either way. And so always make sure to monitor, A, with headphones, and B, look at your meters. You want to make sure that as you're talking, your vocals are bouncing right in the -12 to -6 decibel range. If you get too much louder than that, you start peaking, and if you get too much quieter than that, you lose too much detail to really be able to bring it back without bringing a bunch of noise with it. And so make sure that you're in that -12 to -6 range. Most audio recorders have a little notch there. So make sure that that's where, as you test your levels, you see that's where it's bouncing. Talk a little louder, talk a little softer, and make sure that you're staying right in that range. Switching to the A-Lav. I would recommend, if you were serious, not putting your lapel mics or your lavalier mics on the strings of your hoodie. I wanted to keep these very equal for the comparison of the 2. But this is the wired aperture A-Lav that I'm wearing, which is going directly into the Zoom H6, which we'll get into in a minute. But this brings me to my big drawback of lavalier microphones. And I think there are two. The first one is that they are omnidirectional, and so if there is a lot of wind or ambient noise, a lapel mic is going to pick up everything that's going on around you, where a shotgun mic can isolate sound coming from behind it or from the sides. So you can end up with a little noisier situation with a lapel mic if you don't have an isolated, quiet room to record in. And secondly, and this is the big one, and it bothers me so bad, you can see lapel mics. And that drives me crazy, especially when I see seated interviews and somebody's got this black cable running up their shirt or it's poking out. It's just a great situation to put a shotgun mic in the air because it looks lazy and the eye is drawn to it, and it looks like a TV newscaster, and you lose some of the intimacy, some of the authenticity that you get when you can't see the microphones and the viewer is allowed to just look at the subject and not think about where the sound is coming from. And if they move around a little bit, you don't have the rubbing or the rustle happening where you can see where that's coming from. So that's why I like to move things up to level 2. This is the Video Mic Pro, and I have it mounted on the camera, or technically I guess it's on a stand right next to the camera to simulate it being mounted on the camera. I have it mounted on the camera. The advantage of this setup is that the microphone is a much, much higher quality microphone than the microphone built into the camera. And because it's directional, it shields some of the things that come in from behind into the sides of the mic. And so it's a great way to have audio as you're moving around and as you're on set somewhere. Whatever your camera's pointing at, that's what sound the microphone will record. Again, make sure that your audio levels are set, and so I just had to set this to make sure that my levels were bouncing to keep me in that -12 to -6 range, even though I'm this far away from it. But this is level 2, and for a couple $100s, you can get yourself a Rode VideoMic Pro, and it makes such a difference in the quality of audio that you can get in your DSLR or mirrorless camera. It is a huge, huge difference, and I cannot recommend it enough for beginners and pros alike. It's a really handy tool to keep around because they're battery powered, the batteries last forever, and they're really, really useful. So they get a decent sound, they've got a great frequency range. This is what they are. This is a good place to be. And if you're at level 2 now with the Rode VideoMic Pro, then you can really easily, for about $20 or less if you're handy, you can move to level 3. Level 3 is as simple as moving the VideoMic Pro closer to your speaker's mouth. And with that, you gain a lot more of the low frequencies of somebody's voice. It's a much richer and fuller sound. And you get rid of even more background noise because you're able to turn the levels of the microphone down because the sound is closer to the microphone. I have it in frame, you can see it right here, but you can obviously understand that if you zoom in a little bit more, move the camera slightly, the microphone disappears out of frame and you just have a shot of your subject without any distraction or obstacles in your viewer's way. To make this happen, I'm using right now a microphone boom stand. So this, I got it at Guitar Center. It was like $20. And I put a little adapter so that I can screw it into the bottom of the microphone. But this little setup, when someone's seated, you can put it right over them, position it properly. When you're positioning shotgun microphones, a rule of thumb is to place them sort of pointing at the heart. You don't want it pointing right at the mouth unless you have like a Rode NTG4 or something hyper directional. Most of these you want so that you're talking sort of through the beam, where the beam's coming down in front of the mouth and you're talking through it rather than talking directly up into the microphones, because then you start to get pop noises and it's just, it doesn't sound as pretty. So get yourself a boom microphone stand, or put a broom and some gaff tape together and somehow suspend that microphone in front of your mouth or your subject's mouth, and everything is going to sound a lot better. When you're ready to step up your boom game and get it further away, sometimes as you're doing these more complicated setups, this 3-foot boom arm is just too short and the stand ends up too close to the shot and you limit what camera angles you're able to get. You need to get yourself a boom pole and then some sort of stand and a clamp that can hold your boom pole. And so I have 3 other boom poles. I've got 2 Rode boom poles. One is really, really light and it extends to about 8 feet, and it's able to hold the VideoMic Pro with no issue whatsoever. If I were to put the Rode NTG4 and its grip onto this pole, it would bend the pole. So I have a different heavier duty pole for that. But having this lightweight pole with a VideoMic Pro allows me to do things very nimbly with audio, where all these things are still being recorded directly into the camera for the sake of speed, but I still have the flexibility of just taking a boom pole, setting my camera on a tripod, and being able to get good interviews moving around. And I've done this a couple times, like when I've shot some things at the college school where we're shooting a bunch of students and teachers saying like one or two things. So rather than do this full setup, we're able to put the camera on a tripod, walk around, set it someplace, and put that boom pole out there, get a good clip of them saying what they're saying, then grab the boom pole, move to the next spot. So it's a very nimble thing, which makes things move faster and sound better in all of your projects. So get yourself a good boom pole, get that microphone real close to somebody's mouth, and you're at level 3. Level 4 requires a bit more money, because level 4 is when we switch from recording microphones directly into the camera to recording microphones into an external recorder of some kind. For this video, I'm using a Zoom H6 with a Rode NTG4 plugged into it with an XLR cable. This is a microphone that needs phantom power. They do make a version which you can put a battery in it and you don't need phantom power, which can be helpful, but my Zoom has phantom power, so I really don't mind. A big switch happens when you start using an external recorder, and there's an upside and a downside. The two parts of the upside are, one, it's a much better quality audio than your camera is able to record. It records at a higher bit rate. The data is so much greater and so much broader, and so you're able to take some of the amazing things that this microphone can do and capture so much more of it into an external recorder than you would be able to if you recorded this directly into the camera, or even if you took the feed out of your recorder and put that into your camera, which I've done before for the sake of syncing things. But an audio recorder, external recorder, check your settings, but make sure it can do some amazing things for the quality of your audio compared to what your camera can do natively. The other advantage can be a disadvantage, and that is the advantage of an external recorder is you have your audio separate from your video files. This is being recorded to an SD card in the audio recorder instead of being recorded into the SD card in the camera. And so if something were to happen to one of these cards, I sort of have a backup where the audio may not be great in the camera version, but there's a redundancy where even if I were to lose all the footage, I'd still be able to use the audio from interviews. And I've done that before where you've got some great content, something people said, and you can put B-roll over it and hide the fact that you don't actually have the footage of them saying it. It just ends up being a voiceover. But if you're recording everything into one source, into one card, and anything happens to that card, you're out of luck and you have no options. So when you get to a certain level and you need to have that redundancy, using an external recorder is a great way to make that happen. The drawback is it does add a step in post-production where you have to sync up your audio to your video. Although easy, it is still a step. You have to import two different cards. You have to find which files are supposed to be linked to which files. For example, with this video, I've got 7 different segments that are a part of this, and so I've got 2 cameras and an audio recorder, so I have 21 different files that I need to make sure are labeled properly so that I know which ones go with which and correspond. So you're adding a little bit of bulk to your post-processing, as where if you were to record directly into your camera, you can go right to editing. You've got the audio going into your camera at a good quality. You can move more quickly with just one card and one file already done for you. So think about that with a project where if you have a fast turnaround time, if you know your stuff is going to a mobile device or something where the quality doesn't end up mattering that much, if you're in a good isolated place where there's not a lot of background noise, feel free to record directly into camera because that may be better for you. It really depends on the project. Level 5. Now, level 5 is sort of a level that goes infinitely high into outer space, but the principle of it is the same, and that is your post-production sound processing. And if you record with a really good microphone, like the Rode NTG3 or 4, or Audio-Technica 897, or whatever microphone you use, a good microphone compared to the VideoMic Pro, compared to a lapel microphone, if you put that audio unedited into a Zoom or into a camera and don't touch it in your editing, just include it and export it in the video, you may not notice that much of a difference between the different microphones just side by side. And I did a comparison of the NTG4 and the Rode VideoMic Pro. And what I came out of that video with after reviewing it was that the VideoMic Pro has a richer sound when untouched than the Rode NTG4 does. It seems bigger, bolder, it's got a little bit more bass in it. But as soon as you switch to doing any sort of editing to it, the quality of sound that you get from the cheaper microphones starts to degrade the end product a lot faster than if you're recording with a good microphone into a sound recorder. So consider that unless you're really willing to take the time and do some post-processing, and these things take time to learn and everything changes nonstop from shot to shot, from shoot to shoot, from location to location, if you're not committed to really doing some serious work in your post-production, you may find that investing in the more expensive equipment doesn't actually do that much for your end video. So be careful making purchases and getting expensive equipment if you're not dedicated to adjusting it properly after you've recorded it. There are a few tools that make this very easy. There's some cheap tools built into Final Cut, and I don't know what's in Premiere anymore. I switched from Premiere to Final Cut a couple of years ago. But Final Cut has like a get rid of hum button and a noise reduction button. I think I've never heard anyone have a good experience with either of those. So don't use those, but there's a bunch of free plugins available, and there's a bunch of paid plugins which are worth the few dollars because they make such a difference to your footage. One of them is Crumple Pop, and they have an audio denoise plugin, and you can position your playhead and really quickly pick a part in your audio when you're looking at the waveform that has no one talking but just the tone of the room, and you can click denoise and it'll check what those frequencies are and learn from it and apply a filter over the rest of the clip that lets the vocals come through much, much cleaner, and it's going to take out a bunch of that background noise, and you have a little bit of flexibility to tweak it. That's a great tool, and there are others. There are some from FX Factory Pro that can do similar things. But when you start getting even more serious and into the higher end of level 5, you're going to need to use an audio editing software like Logic, Adobe Audition, or I've been using Isotope's RX6, which is a beast of a program, which allows you to visualize your audio in some completely different ways. And this is where it really starts to show the difference between how much data you've got to start with and what you can do when you have that much data compared to what you can do without it. And I'm in the middle of the MZ course. There's like an 86-hour course on sound for film production, and it's been fascinating, and a lot of it is over my head, and I'm going through really slowly and rewatching things. But the analogy that he uses, which I really like, was the difference between if you've ever edited a JPEG or a photo you've taken with your phone versus editing a raw photo, and what you're able to pull out of the shadows, what you're able to bring down from the highlights, like how much information is maintained even if you can't see it at first. The same is true of audio. If you record a low quality mic into a low quality sound card like the ones built into a lot of cameras, you're going to have, when you start to denoise it, you're going to have the audio fall apart, and it's going to be noisy and sound a little alien-y and processed, as where if you were to use a good microphone into a good recorder and try to process that file, you're going to have so much more data to work with, and you're able to have a better sounding final product because you had that much more information for these plugins to work with and for the software to chew through and find the noise and get rid of it and leave the vocals. So level 5 is a whole beast where you can get as deep as you want into tweaking audio and frequencies and EQ and all things like that. And I'm not going to get into that because this video is already way too long. But suffice it to say that there's a lot of room at level 5 to do things, but it starts taking a lot of time and money because these plugins cost a few dollars. The software can cost thousands of dollars to be able to rescue audio from horrible situations. So you have to find that balance of what's right for you. What kind of projects are you doing? It's a lot easier to get a quiet room than it is to say, hey, I've got the software to turn this noisy factory into a quiet sound stage later. So think about that as you consider what microphones to buy, but depending on what you're doing, depending on what you're filming, and depending on who's watching it and where, That's a bunch of information on the different microphones that exist, what they do, their advantages, their disadvantages, and my experience working with any of them. So thank you for watching this big long video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you have any harsh criticisms, throw those down there too. And if it was helpful to you and you feel like subscribing, it does mean a ton to me, and it's cool to see more and more people doing that. So I saw that my most popular video is the comparison of the NTG4 and the VideoMic Pro, so I thought I'd dive in a little bit more into some other options. If you've got any questions or ideas for what else you'd like to hear, throw them in the comments, and I will do my best. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.